I had a couple ideas for videos, but I actually wanted to cover this idea first, and that is managing a reading list. Recently, probably about a 10, some months ago, I think 10 or so, 9, I really started to get back into reading. Put my mic up a little bit. I really started to get back into reading. Um, and for one reason or another, I don't know. Uh, but I had kind of a voracious appetite for new literature when I first started rereading, and so I bought not necessarily a lot of books, but I always made sure that when I was done with one book that I was interested in, I had another book that I was interested in, and then in kind of classic fashion, something that I'm prone to do is I overdid that a little bit. Um, I was like, oh well, if I give myself a list of books that I'm interested in that is never ending, I'll never stop reading. And you almost get the opposite. It's almost kind of a it's not that's not really how it works. So right now I have probably like I don't even know 20 plus books on my to read list. And it's not that I've stopped reading, it's just that it one complicates your future reading, whatever you want to read in the future, because then you're like, oh, what do I read next? I mean, and it also one thing that I found that I appreciate that I didn't know I appreciated until I started reading one book after another after another after another is really getting lost in one book. My favorite books from when I was a kid and now are books that I can revisit and enjoy again and again, and I think that's also kind of how you digest things properly. You shouldn't. I don't think you should always be stuck on one book, but if you really enjoy something, revisit it because in some of these stories, like Lord of the Rings is an amazing example. I've only read it once, and I really want to read it again because I didn't I didn't even scratch the surface of the metaphorical depth and knowledge that exists within that book. I mean, I got a good idea of the story, so if somebody asks me about the story of Lord of the Rings, I can be like, yeah, this is how it goes, and this is some of the things that happened. I probably don't remember all the things that happened, and I think that also makes a good book. That's how you can tell that a book is really worth your time, is if you go back and you find things that you missed, and that's been the case with every book that I've read, with the possible exceptions of a few. There's one, and I'm going to shout it out. It's not really shout it out. I'm going to call it out. Uh, it's called Left Behind by, I don't even remember who wrote it. It's like this Christian apocalypse book, and not a fan. And it's not even the message, the story. It's none of that. It's literally the writing. The writing was so cringe and not enjoyable. Like the dialogue in it was bad, and I think it's because I kind of shoved that into one thing that I've really been focused on with my reading list is reading works that are just kind of like transcend time and are very popular. So a lot of authors that I've bought, like Ernest Hemingway. I read a bunch of Kurt Vonnegut. I have some Leo Tolstoy coming. I have Jane Austen coming, which I'm interested to start because she's a very female-centered author. But I've heard a lot of people say, or I've heard some people say, not a lot of people say, because not a lot of people have, not that many people read that much, but that a book like Pride and Prejudice is actually very beneficial for like a man to read to get that kind of perspective into a woman's mind, because it can be hard to get understand those things. And I also have a good deal of nonfiction that I want to read, like stories about people, like the Escape from North Korea book that I have, Defying Hitler. I have a huge book on Stalingrad that I want to read. It's like all about the history of that battle, which is like a devastating battle. I'm really excited to read that. But yeah, when you have this giant reading, like I don't want to read Stalingrad next because I'm currently reading a book that has another book after it. So I have to read that book and then that book. in my mind, and I don't read multiple books at once. I don't like doing that. It seems like if I could be reading this book, I should be finishing the other one. Why? Like, and it also kind of just gets me off of the message of the book that I'm reading. So, yeah, and maybe this is just advice for me or people who don't like reading multiple books at a time, but like, pace yourself. Don't bury yourself in books, because that is effectively what I've done. And it's nice to have all these books around and to kind of, when I'm done with the book, I was like, oh, I have a bunch of choices, but it's also weirdly unmotivating, because part of it is kind of like vanity optics. Like if somebody comes in here and they're like, you have a lot of books, and I'm like, yeah, I've read half of them. Half of them are still on my to-read list. They're either going to think I'm lazy. That's probably going to be they're like, oh, or I'm just kind of a poser. You're like, oh, this guy has 50, a book collection that he's read 50% of why. And it's just because I'm kind of an idiot who buries myself in literature, because I kind of have this voracious appetite for this stuff right now, and especially kind of classics. I really want to read all the classics and understand why they're classics, and so far I haven't been disappointed. So far, all the like kind of older, not older, but classic, very held in high esteem authors that I've read, Tolkien, like, yes, I finally understand. And I had so many friends and family who are big fans of Lord of the Rings, and I was like, oh man, I don't know, I could just never get into it, and that's because I just was kind of approaching it on the surface level, and I was like, all right, I'm going to dive into the books, and they're great. And Vonnegut, I love satire. Also Douglas Adams, I read a lot of him. Well, not a lot of him, but I read, I think, 2.5 of his Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series, which I kind of have the same problem with Adams as I do with Vonnegut, as I do with a lot of comedic ventures. Comedy is really hard to extrapolate over time in a certain way, especially seemingly so for authors. I know Kurt Vonnegut like kind of was doing drugs and then stopped doing drugs, and the books that he wrote when he was not doing drugs anymore were kind of like a little less special, is how I would say. The early Kurt Vonnegut is like very special and very wacky, but in like a really kind of entertaining and funny and eccentric way. And yeah, the newer Kurt Vonnegut just gets like, it's too on the nose, like low blows, and it's kind of low hanging fruit in a metaphorical and sometimes very literal sense, if you catch my drift, or if you've read Kurt Vonnegut, specifically Breakfast of Champions, which is just kind of a weird book. It's weird to read through. It's funny at times, and the story's kind of interesting, and it explores like mental health, and it's hard to know what it explores just because it's so strange. And Kilgore Trout's an interesting character who actually ends up being like Kurt Vonnegut or something. But yeah, it's don't bury yourself in books. I'm trying to think of other authors I've read. Oh, John Steinbeck, but I've read John Steinbeck. George Orwell, his books are amazing, really good. Who else is over there? Jack London. I had read him in high school. I just reread The Call of the Wild, and man, I'm gonna read White Fang soon. Those are good. These like, I don't know. It's so yeah. Essentially, I'm buried in books, and I have a bunch of other classics I still need to read, like Solzhenitsyn. I have his Gulag Archipelago. I have Leo Tolstoy, The Death of Ivan Ilyich, Aldous Huxley, The Grapes of Wrath. That's a John Steinbeck novel I have not read yet. Like I said, Jane Austen, and there's like I have some Shakespeare I want to read. Like I want to reread Hamlet and maybe Romeo and Juliet. I don't know. I mean, that story is just kind of so shoved into your head through kind of popular culture and school and stuff that, yeah, I don't know how much more there is really to examine of that story. Probably a lot, but I'm a little disenchanted by it, mostly because my sister made me watch, and maybe I was a little bit more willing than I want to admit. But not the not like it's the kind of modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. I think Leonardo DiCaprio was in it, and I don't really remember a lot about it, but I watched it multiple times, begrudgingly, maybe not so begrudgingly. It's not that great of a movie. I don't really remember that much about it. Um, it's just like a modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. It's all right, kind of woes of growing up with a sister. I also saw Titanic more times than I care to admit. But yeah, don't bury yourself in books. Kind of lightly coach yourself in books. Like, you don't want to be buried alive. You want to still be able to like break out of your pile of books, because there's this thing that happens, I think, with any endeavor. If you bury yourself in it, you're gonna like resent it and not want to do it, because like kind of work kind of falls into that category. Music a little bit. There have been times at school where I've had like a bunch of songs to learn, and mostly that's just due to pacing. I've tried to learn them all at once, and it just makes me like, these songs suck. Like, I'm so tired of them. Can make you resent stuff. So just do things in manageable portions. That seems to be the takeaway from this rant. But yeah, random message that I kind of wanted to get out, because I've been feeling that lately, and I have like 3 or 4 books in the mail still coming, and I bought every time I go to I kind of live in a small town. They don't have really a good bookstore here, but every time I go into an outlying larger town, I'll find a bookstore and I'll just buy a book. It's kind of been like a habit that I've made, and I need to break that a little bit. Not that because I love bookstores, and I love stores in general. I love music stores, bookstores. I went to a comic store the other day. They're really cool. I just kind of like exploring things and looking at them and being like, that's cool. I want to try that, whatever it is. And yeah, not healthy. It's not unhealthy, but it's just not realistic in the sense of getting things done, and getting things done in a way that is realistic. Yeah. So there's probably not much more I can really say about that. I was that way with pedals too. Kind of buried myself in pedals. Although you can't really, like guitar pedals, you can't really bury yourself in guitar pedals, and that's another tangent that I'm going off. It's not has anything to do about books, but don't bury yourself in books. I've said that 4 or 5 times now, but that's the message. So that's it's worth saying many times. Manage your reading list to the best of your ability. And more information? I don't think so. It's Sunday. Happy Sabbath. I hope nobody's working. Just kidding. There are probably a lot of people working. Bad joke. But have a good new week as of 6 hours from now, 7 hours from now. Until then, until next time, hopefully I'll be talking about books next time, and not the behemoth of mountain burial books that I have presented myself with. That was a terrible sentence. Bye.